This next tape is of Pete Caldwell. Pete was a lifelong resident of Ansley Park. And what is, I think, impressive about Pete's recollections is that he gives the overview of what it was like as a young boy to grow up in Ansley Park in the 1950s and 1960s. He will give you the reflections of the idea of trolleys that ran through Ansley Park, or the rubber-tired buses that came through Ansley Park, and also what it was like to play in the woods, Collier Woods, which later became Sherwood Forest, beginning in the 1960s. But he has a whimsical outlook on the different features of growing up as a young boy in Ansley Park. So I think you'll enjoy listening to his recollections.
With me, it's more complicated because I grew up in Ansley Park. So part of this is sort of a provincialism. I've never really lived anywhere else. I've lived in this house for 20 years, and I grew up actually not in Ansley Park proper, but over on Monroe Drive. Or Monroe Drive, as they say around here. Monroe is not a proper pronunciation. And I can speak to that area and to Ansley Park in the late 40s and 50s, which is sort of a middle area, not the birth of it nor the modern times, but in a real simple time. And of course, it was for me my childhood. Back then, Monroe Drive was a dead-end street. It was also the end of the trolley line. There were electric trolleys that ran from downtown all the way out to the city limit, which was also at the end of Monroe Drive, just past where Wilmington Road comes into Monroe. And that's where Monroe turned into a dirt road and dead-ended, and that's where the trolleys turned around, electric trolleys. So Ansley Park was filled in those days with overhead electrical wires, 2 wires for each trolley in both directions. So 4 wires ran down Peachtree, down 16th Street, across Inman Circle, down 17th to the Prado, and then up to Maddox Drive, down the hill there, around Avery, Polo Drive, up Montgomery Ferry, turned left on Monroe, went down, turned around, and came back. And that was the trolley line up through, I think, probably the very late 50s, or maybe even into the early 60s, when they the city put in the diesel buses and pulled out the trolleys. But the trolleys were very quiet and big and clunky, and had great big tires. And I remember in the winter when the lines would ice up, we'd try and stay up late so you could watch the trolleys come by and make sparks with the ice on the lines. It was pretty exciting if you were 7 years old or something. Also, the Red Cross building wasn't there at that time, nor was the freeway. So Monroe Drive, as it dead ended, it went up. The dirt road went up to the top of the hill over there on the other side of where the freeway is now, and it dead ended in a little. Hey, kitty, how you doing, bud? Dead end. Let me put you down. You don't want to hear all about this. It dead ended in a little shanty town. There was about, 15 or 20 black families that lived up there, and there was a little church, and the church is still there. You can find it up there if you go driving around up behind the Radisson or whatever that hotel's called this week. They seem to change the name all the time. Also of interest is on the other end of Monroe, as it came up toward Piedmont, where Ansley Mall is now, there was Frances Wilson's house was there, and she had horses and cows down there at that time. This was in the 50s, up I think until the early 60s, whenever they built Ansley Mall. There was a cow pasture in the bottom land down there by the creek, and we used to go down there and ride horses. And there were, Piedmont was I think 2 lanes at that time, and there was no light at Monroe and Montgomery Ferry, and I'm not even sure that there was originally was a light at Piedmont and Monroe. It was pretty much country. That was out in the country. There was a Woods Texaco, and where the laundry is now, there was a pure oil station. That'll date that. And the one little row of stores where Gene and Gabe's is now, there was a Broyles Grocery, which is where we used to buy all our food, and a drugstore with a soda fountain, and I can't recall what else, a couple of other little places. But that was really all of that was a little crossroads. It was like a little country crossroads, it really was. Out from town, and I don't remember what year they moved the city limit out to wherever it is now, out near Brookhaven, I believe. But it's been quite a while. What else? That's kind of the history. I remember when they built Sherwood Forest. That was exciting. That was all woods and pasture and whatnot. And for a kid, when they build 30 or 40 new homes, or 50 or however many they build all at once, it was a paradise to play in. You know, all that new houses going up in those days. That was pretty exciting.
Did you used to go over there?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was an easy run from Monroe. You'd go across the golf course there. The golf course was there. We were members of that country club, and although I never considered it a country club per se, it was just the club, and it was quite a bit different from the way it is now. It was very small. That building's been enlarged at least 4 or 5 times over the years, and the golf course was pretty rudimentary, I think. And there was a pool and the usual country club kind of things, but in a very sort of casual kind of way. Nothing like the driving club or the the big Atlanta country clubs. It's kind of come up a notch, over the years. But in those days, it was really something quite. Not a society thing. It wasn't Cherokee and it wasn't a Capital City Club. It was just a place where you could go get a popsicle, and kids' eyes were red with chlorine, and there was always guys walking around in golf shoes and that kind of thing. But it didn't have any of the overtones of society that the other clubs had. But very comfortable place. And so I was saying you could walk across the golf course and be right there at Sherwood Forest. Those are my memories.
Woods over there?
Yeah, woods and pasture too. I think there were some pastures. The old farmhouse is still there. It's up high up on the hill there in Sherwood Forest. So it was farm. I think all this was originally a farm. One of the farmhouses that was part of the farm that was around Monroe is still there on Allen Road, where Allen Road comes into Piedmont Way, I believe. There's a real old house there. You have to look for it kind of because it was quite small. But that house predates all the other houses in that area. Oh, another interesting thing, and a lot of people may remember, is Monroe Gardens.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, at the end of Monroe Drive, where it dead ended, there was a nursery owned by Mr. Monroe, and he owned that property down in the bottom there on the left, just adjacent to where Wimbledon Road comes in now. And his home was there, and his little office, both of which were log cabins, big, really elaborate log cabins. And down in the bottom land, there was a real nice nursery, half of which was a working nursery where he had shrubbery, primarily landscaping shrub type things. But he also had a formal garden that you could walk in down there, and a big clubhouse that was also a log thing. They used to have square dances down there and that kind of thing. It was, I think people could rent it out, or it was available. Had a huge stone fireplace and a big log place, and we'd have picnics and whatever. We'd go down there on Easter, and parents would take pictures of you and all dressed up. And back in the days when they first had color photography, and all the colors looked sort of pink and yellow. It was about the only 2 colors. So you'd wear your bright red stuff, and it'd be sort of fuchsia looking. But I remember that. Also, Monroe owned property near where Ansley Mall is now. He had a small office up there, and I think he kept his trucks and things up there. It was pretty rural looking. It really wasn't anything like what we see now. Ansley Park itself, one reason I dwell on this area over there is it's changed so substantially, whereas Ansley Park itself really has not. The houses have gotten a facelift, and there's more attention to, say, the traffic islands and things of that nature. But the overall look of the place and feel of the place is unchanged the way it was in the 50s. I had a paper route, and my paper route was up around the Prado, near where Maddox Drive comes into the Prado, and then up Ansley Drive and over, what is that street? I can't remember the name, which it is. It may be the end of Montgomery Ferry, I can't recall, as it goes down there by Beverly Road. Well, anyway, that was my paper route, and we'd pick up the papers over in a garage on 19th Street, and then deliver them on our bicycles to all the houses. And the governor's mansion was on my paper route. I used to deliver Governor Talmadge's paper every evening.
This is a question we've never gotten an answer to, but just like what was the governor's mansion like?
Oh, I can answer that. It was gray stone, a very, very dark and imposing looking building, not a graceful building at all. One of those, I don't think there's another house exactly like it in Ansley Park. It was made of a similar gray stone as you see on my front porch here. Like, in fact, that same type of masonry work that you see in a lot of the older houses in the framing of the porch and some of the columns. But the whole house was that way with a tile roof, and I can't recall, it was a red or green, I believe. and big porch all the way around, but the house was dark with small windows, and it was imposing and big, but it wasn't particularly graceful, and it wasn't in a style that was cohesive with any of the rest of the stuff. Not, you know, we see so much Tudor and so much of the old, some touches of Victorian, and just generally what I call sort of American type houses. A lot of craftsman houses in Ansley Park, that kind of thing. But Governor's Mansion broke the mold. It was just this giant, massive, is a good word for it, damp looking, clunky place. I never was inside, so I don't know. Didn't get any invitations. I couldn't understand it. Didn't invite 7-year-old paper boys to the Governor's Mansion. But Talmadge's son was in my Cub Scout troop, so that was it. Eugene was a fat kid in the Cub Scout troop who could really never do much of anything. Right now I say that, and Eugene's probably grown up to be a Rhodes Scholar or something. But that's the way it is with kids. I went to Spring Street School in the heyday of the purple and green, and still see some of my Spring Street friends who still live here in Ansley Park. But Emily Tillman comes to mind, who was Emily Anderson, I think, at the time, and a few others. Cotton Alston, who was a Spring Streeter, I think, and several others. That was the school bus ran through Ansley Park, picked us up every morning, and we had, you know, the usual grammar school type things, paper sales, and I don't think we sold as much stuff as the kids sell now. That we didn't have wall or wrapping paper and whatever else all they do now. But I don't know. Help me. I'm stuck now.
How's the neighborhood changed over that years, or has
I think.
or
Well, yeah. I think what's changed is the people more than the physical neighborhood. You know, it would be just state the obvious to say that most of these houses have now been remodeled or restored. I mean, I've restored mine, but a lot of people have remodeled them, which is, that physically is a larger change. But the houses have still kept their character, and physically the neighborhood is still very eclectic architecturally, which I think is one of the real charming things about it. The fact that it doesn't have a necessary theme. Everything just sort of flows together in a seemingly random way, and just for some unknown reason works. The trees certainly draw it all together in the parks, and you know, there was some definite foresight in the original design and in the idea that people would build largish homes, but along no specific plan. So I don't think there's any major change to the neighborhood. What's really changed is the people. When I was growing up, it was all old families, people who probably had families had lived here since the very beginning, since the 19-teens and 1920s when all these houses were built. Moneyed families, Atlanta families, pretty well a social caste, if you will, that was pretty homogeneous. And now, since the 60s, when there was a period in the 60s when things looked a little shaky. And I think a lot of younger people, like myself, bought houses in Ansley Park on the hopes that this was before any Midtown. Actually, this is when Midtown was really hell. It was bad, and during the tight squeeze area in 10th Street, and some really before Colony Square, things were rough, and it looked iffy. It looked like it might go multi-family dwellings, apartments. It looked like it could slide in the way that Midtown had at that time, and everybody saw it as a domino kind of thing. They saw possibly Morningside going that way, and Virginia Highlands was already pretty much. And of course, what's happened is the exact opposite of what everyone thought. Ansley Park never really changed. It never went down much at all. It was just in people's mind. And these other neighborhoods that did go down are in just remarkable resurgence. And fashionable again, and on and on. So the people are different. A whole new, not just generation of people, but a whole new ilk of people. A bunch of sort of adventuresome younger people came in here who weren't old Atlanta people, who were urban people, but not necessarily from the moneyed families, and not necessarily people who'd gone to Westminster and were members of the driving club and so on. So, you know, the neighborhood assimilated that whole element, and as a result, Mr. Clayton and myself, and a bunch of weirdos now live down in here, and basically a different type of person moved in than not the old Atlanta family, a younger group of people who really were coming from a totally different place. And I think what happened, interestingly enough, is that the neighborhood assimilated those people, and what has resulted is the same thing has happened with the people that live here now, as as originally happened with the architecture. It's eclectic, it's all over the place, it's diverse, it complements each other. It's certainly anything but the original, old Atlanta type families. It's a little bit of everything. A lot of people that aren't from Georgia at all. Lord, people that aren't even from the South. But you see, you know what I mean. And I think that's really the biggest change, much more so than than any physical change. And the stability of the thing is a change since the 60s, but not really a change from the original neighborhood. It's been amazingly resilient and amazingly resistant to physical change. How that, even with all the remodeling, even with the, sooner or later all these trees are going to go, and it would be interesting to see. There's a photograph I hope we can get for this thing, and I don't know where it is. It's a photo taken at the corner in 1909 or something like that, at the corner of the Prado and Peachtree Circle, looking toward the old Weinkauf mansion. There is not a tree in the picture. It is the damnedest thing you ever saw, and yet you can recognize some of the houses. All those trees that are now 80 or 90 years old and towering above the houses, and are the real benchmark of the calling card of Ansley Park. Didn't exist when this neighborhood. This must have been just a pasture. It was cleared. So I guess we'll see a change in the trees over the next few years. I see some big ones starting to go here and there, and it's a concern, but it's inevitable too. So that's a lot of people, I guess, are planning new ones. I certainly have. I knew Pat Conroy peripherally. My wife knew him pretty well. I'd say, in my mind, he's probably the most famous, except for the governor, of course. And, I guess, I can't remember who was in the governor's mansion when they moved it. It might have been Vandermeer, but I don't remember. Maybe it was after that. I have no idea, really. Maybe Carter. Who knows? Anyhow, the governor, of course, was probably always the most famous. There were a lot of city, politicians that have lived here, Ellis Arnold and some others. But I guess the writer, Pat Conroy, would be the only other person I can think of. I'm probably overlooking somebody just obvious that I can't think of, but that's all. I don't know who else is famous that has lived here. You know better than I do, probably. You're the historian.
Well, and I guess, Hal Gulliver.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Hal, for sure. Oh, yeah, local celebrity. Right. And Natalie Dupree next door. She's pretty well known because of the TV stuff. Yeah, I see Hal out pounding the pavement. He doesn't exactly jog, but he kind of goes around, and it makes jogging sort of motion.
Oozing.
Yeah, makes jogging motions around the park. But yeah, certainly that. I don't know. One of the things I like about Ansley Park is, even though it's city living and the houses are very close together, and there is a society to it if you choose to participate, it's also a very private place, and surprisingly private given the proximity of the houses and given the fact that you really do kind of, particularly me having lived here for all these years, pretty much know everybody. But you can be a private person here, and I think that it speaks well of the neighborhood, and part of that is that's sort of the nature of city living too. I think people that live in the city realize that they need to give other people space, and people around here don't necessarily just drop in for coffee or come over to borrow an egg or whatever like you see out in the suburbs so much. And maybe that's not good, but in my mind that is good. I like that. And you can know somebody very well lives 4 or 5 doors down the street and not know your next door neighbor for years. I mean, I don't know how many people do, but it certainly is okay to do that. I think that an in-town neighborhood like this is always going to attract artists. It's the kind of thing all of Midtown would, and a lot of Caldwell Park and a number of these other areas. This is going to, needless to say, probably attract more of the successful artists because it's got to be expensive to live here. And but in general, I think, and there's, I think we have, it's certainly, to my mind, the artists that come to mind, painter Doug Montrose was a real good friend of mine, and I think certainly a painter of note, unusual style, and a man with a different view of the world than anybody I've ever seen. Al Clayton has lived here for as long as I can remember, and certainly his work in photography is known not only commercially but artistically in the region, if not in nationwide. And A lot of media people, myself certainly, and Jess Crawford would come to mind, and I don't know how artistic, I wonder how artistic that is sometimes, but it certainly puts you in rubbing elbows with artistic people anyway. And Natalie Dupree is I think, a lot of following not only for cooking but as a sort of guru of art. And I mentioned Pat Conroy before, but and there's probably many more that I just don't know. I think a neighborhood like this is going to attract that element. Any in-town neighborhood that there's a certain funky factor to Ansley Park that it's elegant funk, I admit, but it's funk nonetheless. And I don't know how to define. I've been asked to do this. It's a term I use all the time, but I guess if you don't know what funk is, you don't need to know, or you're never going to know. Hard to describe. But old in-town neighborhoods have it, and it's a type of charm, and it could be have negative overtones as well. But I think artists are drawn to that definitely, and there are plenty of them around to prove my point. One of the memories of my childhood that's probably most indelible is, and probably something that people immediately when I mention it, people that lived here in the 40s and 50s will remember, but have since forgotten, is electric trolleys. Atlanta had electric buses in those days, and Ansley Park was the end of the line. The trolleys came down Peachtree and turned right on 16th Street and crossed over Peachtree Circle onto Inman Circle and down 17th Street to the Prado and around down Maddox Drive, across Avery, Polo, up Montgomery Ferry, took a left on Monroe Drive and went down to Monroe Drive, dead-ended in the trolley and turned into a dirt road actually. And that's where the trolley turnaround was. The wires went around, and there were overhead all these wires, two wires in each direction on all the streets. So it was quite different looking with the streets with all this paraphernalia hanging from telephone poles for the trolley power for the electric buses, which were bright orange in color and quite large and clunky, and they were not the track type trolleys. They had rubber tires, but they were electric. It was a unusual time, and I think they ran certainly until the late 50s, probably until the early 60s when they changed to diesel buses. Atlanta had electric powered buses in Ansley Park. That was the city limit. End of Monroe Drive, right where Wimbledon Road comes into Monroe, was the city limit, and that's where the trolleys stopped and turned around. There was no freeway there. There was no Armour Industrial Park or anything. It just ended in some woods and a little shanty town up there, and a little church, black church up there, which is still there. If you go up and look for it up on the hill on the other side of what's now the freeway, you can find that little brick church up there. I don't know, the trolleys had a lot to recommend them. They didn't make any exhaust, and they were quite quiet. They were very quiet. They gave off the most wonderful sparks during ice storms. That was very cool when you were a kid to watch the sparks jump when they went by, when the lines were icy.